morning, everyone. I'm Jesse Lipner.
I'm Thomas Ziemba.
I'm Sarah Elish.
I'm Nick Cromach, and we are Pure Wave Desalination. So according to a study done by the UN in 2019, approximately 90% of all natural disasters have some sort of impact on drinking water resources. So when this happens, a lot of the treatment plants, the wells, and pipelines are disrupted, making it nearly impossible to produce filtered water. And the water that is already filtered is likely to be contaminated by sewage and other hazardous waste. So when this happens, people spring for emergency supplies like bottled water, but these are very limited, which means that people can be left without water for days or even weeks. So with these disasters in mind, our solution is to create a desalination unit that is, number one, portable, so you can bring it with you wherever you need, that is reliable, requiring no filter changes or minimal maintenance, and that can produce enough water for 2 people within a 24-hour period, which we estimate to be around 7 liters.
So there's 3 main desalination methods out there right now. The first one is reverse osmosis. This is where water is pushed through a semi-permeable membrane, leaving fresh water and leaving contaminants behind. The biggest cons of this are frequent maintenance is required, as a lot of water gets pushed through the membrane, it becomes less effective over time and can get clogged. It also has less of a yield. Since water is being pushed through, the other suspended solids in it get left behind, leaving about a 50% yield from the input. The next is thermal. This is where water is boiled, turning into water vapor, which leaves behind any salt or other impurities, and it kills off any harmful bacteria. The biggest constants are its rate of production. It can sometimes be slow, and another thing is it's mainly done on larger scales. The main use of thermal right now is in power plants that generate a lot of heat. They include a desalination unit to use this leftover heat. And then there's electrolysis. This uses electricity through an anode and a cathode to separate the salt from the water. Biggest constants are it's very power consuming, and it can be difficult to separate the salt from the fresh water. So what's on the market now? We looked at smaller scale models. Most small scale models currently are reverse osmosis. They can be very expensive. Most of the portable units are in the range of $2,000 to $4,000, but some can push up to $5,000. Currently there's no thermal small scale models on the market. Like I said, they're generally power plants or bigger desalination plants. There's some very small scale and slow solar stills, which is just using the heat from the sun to evaporate the water.
So some ethical considerations that we need to think about for our model. Number one, if people are relying on this as their main source of water, we need to make sure that we can consistently produce filtered water, that we are always meeting EPA standards, and that we are also not using pipes that corrode, as this will contaminate our own water. The next consideration is brine collection. So after the water goes through the desalination process, there's going to be a layer of salt brine that is left. So we need to make sure there's a way that we can remove this so that it can be properly disposed of. Improper disposal of this can be very harmful to the ecosystem. And the last thing we need to think about is system debris. So we want to make sure that none of our components are going to break off and pollute the environment.
So with drinking water, we really need to look at what is in our water that we're going to be using. So we've taken some drinking water standards from the EPA and WHO. We've narrowed that list down to the above, which are commonly found in seawater, which is what we'll be dealing with. Most importantly, we want to focus on sodium and chloride, which, as many of you commonly know, is salt. The next we want to focus on is microorganisms, which would include E. coli, Giardia, and algae, which we wouldn't want in the water. The algae will produce cyanotoxins, which, of course, given by the name, is toxic and harmful to humans. Next, we have our requirements. So, as Jesse said earlier, we want to produce 7 liters, as per day a person consumes about 3.5 liters of water. We'd also like it to be, of course, rid of those contaminants because we don't want any harm to come to you as you drink this water at the end. So we want to remove all the salt and contaminants. We also would like to make the device portable, so it needs to be under 40 pounds, as well as be easily disassembled to allow for easier transportation. So here we have our basic work breakdown structure. What's what we can plan to accomplish in the next semester and what we've already accomplished. Currently, we're finalizing our design and finishing it up, so this way we can begin to order parts and get those parts in so we may begin building as soon as we get back from the break. Again, here's our schedule with our tasks and timeline. This way we can keep ourselves on task and hopefully on time to finish by the end of next semester.
To get to our design, This process relies on water being boiled into a vapor and then is condensed back into a liquid to separate the salt. Above, you can see the heat that's required to complete these processes. These processes, or this amount of heat, can then be used with the power required in the heat source to determine the approximate amount of time to complete our process. Power is a major limitation in our design. So the main two sources are either a generator owned by a homeowner already or a battery. For our case, due to budget constraints, we're going to use an outlet to simulate a generator, but compatibility with a battery will also be used in our final product. So this is our basic mechanical design. We will begin by inputting water. This will go through a mesh filter to remove any large contaminants. This will then flow into a UV tank to kill off any living microorganisms within the water. This water will then be split into a heating tank and a pump water tank. The heating tank is where the water will be boiled. This will go up through a funnel as it is converted to water vapor, and then this will go through a condenser and be finally collected in our collection tank. So this is our 3D model. This is what we plan our system to look like. And importantly, in the top right, you can see our design can be, each part was designed to be taken apart and compact into a tight space to make it easily portable.
So the first part was the input jug. We chose a 7.5 liter tank, and we chose it because when it's filled up, it'll weigh 15 pounds, which is easily portable. So that, along with the handle, we wanted a wide range of people, young or old, to be able to carry the water from the sea, wherever the water source is, to the desalination unit. The next is a mesh filter. This is a 2-inch mesh filter that's about 20 microns thick, or the mesh is 20 microns. This is used to try and get any big particles out, so any big suspended particles, or algae or seaweed or any debris left over from a disaster. So this is just to try and filter some of that stuff out. And it's made of stainless steel in order to resist corrosion from the seawater.
Now this is our UV light. Similarly to what we said, we want to kill those microorganisms, and we want to make sure they're all completely going and out of the water prior to use. The wavelength that the UV light emits is 254 nanometers, which is perfect for what we need, as the range is 200 to 280 nanometers. That will effectively kill microorganisms. So within the UV light tank is the UV light, and of course this is used to shield the eyes of the user, as looking directly into the UV light will cause retina damage, and we especially don't want that with our users. So we've created a stainless steel tank that will shield it, and the gasket around the top of the lid will maintain a seal, so this way it's closed up tight and nobody can look into it.
So for our heater, we decided to go with an immersion heater, which sits inside of our boiling pot. It's a screw and plug immersion heater, meaning that it will screw into the side of the pot, which will allow the heating element to sit in there nicely. And the reason we decided to go with the immersion heater is because it's for efficiency reasons, as when the heating element is inside the water, it'll heat up faster and allow us to get to our end result quicker. This is our boiling tank. It's pretty standard stainless steel pot, just meant to contain the water as it's being boiled. And then up there is our funnel and the lid. This is a part that we're going to manufacture ourselves. It's a standard part just meant for the condenser to attach to, which allows for our process to continue.
Continuing from that, we have the condenser. This will work similarly to a shell and tube heat exchanger. The water vapor will go through the center tube, and a cooler liquid water will run through the outside to recondense this. And this will be gravity fed into our collection tank to eliminate extra power needing to be supplied to our system. This is our pump that will pump water on the outside of our condenser, and we chose a pretty small model with a lower wattage, again, to save power.
And this is our collection tank and our pump tank. It'll hold 9.46 liters. This was chosen so the desalination unit could be run multiple times in case anyone wanted to fill up, it would be able to. We also wanted the spout to be on it, so in case if anyone wanted to grab water at any point during the process, they'd be able to. And this is our budget. It's a very simplified version. So in the expect the work we have walked down in the red is a lot of estimates. For example, the heater, similar models were around $200, but we're waiting on the quote from the vendor. But we're expecting to be under $500 total, which means the budget.
So these are some of our preliminary experiments. We wanted to test how much salt and water we yield after each test using our chosen thermal process. So the first test we used 40 milliliters with a salt concentration of 37 grams per liter, which is on the higher end of the sea level scale. And then we used for our second test 500 milliliters, which would be with the 28 grams per liter, which is towards the middle of the sea level salt concentration. So as you can see up here, we have our basic equipment set up. We have the heater, the flask. The flask is connected to the condenser, which is similarly what we're going to use for that we're constructing ourselves for our unit. And then that is circulating water throughout from the sink. That's about 20 degrees Celsius. And then the water that condenses will run into the collection.
Notably, from our 40 milliliter test, we had about 32 milliliters of water, which is about an 80% water yield. We expect to have a little bit higher than this since we had some spillage in our testing, losing some of our final water. And for our 500 milliliter test, we had about 475 milliliters, which is a 95% yield. Another error that we encountered in this one was due to thermal expansion, some water came high enough to get into our condenser. So we made sure with our design of our boiling tank that we have enough extra room so that this does not occur. So we'll expect around an 80 to 90% yield with our final product.
So moving forward, our next step is first to order all of our parts. Once we have all of our parts, we can assemble our unit. And then the hard part begins. We can start our testing and decide what final design changes we need to make. Special thank you to Dr. B, Dr. Anai, who's our advisor, Mr. Mitch Adams, and Dr. Kamari. And also to the rest of the engineering faculty for getting us here today.
These are just some basic resources we've used, especially looking at the EPA codes and standards and ethical codes. Questions?
So, is it generally a common sense for us to understand the water vapor after it cools down is generally safe to drink? Is that the correct fact?
Generally, after we found that it was 30 degrees Celsius, which is a little bit warmer than what you
No,
thought.
generally, is that safe enough to drink? That's generally considered safe to drink, right? Then why would you need a UV?
That was just preliminary beforehand. So we want to make sure nothing gets by. Because in the slight chance that something survives the boiling process, we'd rather have too much than too little.
Do some investigation about that. I mean, generally people consider that boiling heat is pretty safe after, I'm not 100% sure about it. You really don't need the UV process. So I mean, it's not necessary then, simpler is better, generally speaking. You see what I mean? Especially you choose the thermal approach. I think that's one of the big advantages of the thermal approach. You pretty much kill lots of the bad, harmful stuff in there. You see what I mean? So do a research. There's a very good chance you may not need that UV. If you don't need it, don't just make it unnecessary like a fancier just for the sake of having it. You really okay. So do that research, and there's a very good chance you may not need it. Second is okay, so why? And so, like, don't try to squeeze it. You're trying to make a point. You don't have to squeeze it out the last drop. Because if you, like you guys did an experiment, you really cannot squeeze the last drop. And when you have a real system, that's going to harm your system. Because especially when the concentration, the back stuff, concentration is higher stuff, chemical reaction, all this stuff, you understand what I'm saying, right? You get it nastier and nastier at the end. So your system should cap it when you reach like 30%, 40%. Because the source is a lot. I mean, nobody has to conserve its source. Unless you're in a desert, you see the source is precious. But most of the time, with those things, you water supply is infinite, pretty much. So the source is not concerned. Then why do you have to squeeze the last drop? You actually don't have to. Because when you get to the last drop, it gets nasty, pretty nasty in there, and you ruin your system very quickly. You see what you have there, right? So you want to kind of stop when you even get to like 30, 40%, you want to stop there, just refill and get the, because that way you can make sure you understand, right? Otherwise your system is contaminated very quickly.
That's what we were kind of planning on doing. So the preliminary test was just to make sure, to see how much actually like we get if we were to do it on a smaller scale with more efficiency. We know that maybe probably once we get to the whole big system, we're going to lose maybe 30% efficiency.
Yeah, and
or
also you
more.
really don't have to go all the way to the end, because that's not the point.
Yeah, we'll make sure to take that into consideration. Thank you. Yes. Go ahead.
Did you consider running this thing in a vacuum to lower the boiling point of water and to gain efficiency that way?
Yes, so with that, we'd have to use the UV light then, because by lowering the pressure, we'd also lower the boiling temperature, which wouldn't kill as much bacteria or microorganisms.
But you're counting on your UV on the vapor to kill the bacteria, right?
Yes, as part of the whole system, yes. So we have thought about it, but we also have to conserve our water usage. So by using that, we have to buy another pump to then pump the air out of it.
Did you do any analytic work to justify these decisions? In other words, did you model the flow of fluids and heat in the system?
Other than calculations, we have not done any like actual models to show how much water is flowing through our system.
That was going to be done after we chose it as some parts based on preliminary wattage calculations based on the thermodynamic. But we'll definitely have to look at doing that as well.
Thank you.
It'll be approximately 1,300 watts. That's 1,000 watts for our immersion heater and 300 for the pump. The UV light will run separately from these systems, so we don't need to worry. It will be less than that 1,300 watts.
What is the source of power?
We're assuming that it's going to be a generator owned by a homeowner, but that's just because our budget is very expensive to buy a reliable battery. So we're going to make sure that like a 1,500 watt battery can easily run our system without issues.
And for your prediction, there's cold water that comes into contact indirectly.
It's indirect.
What is the source of the cold water?
The UV tank, after the water is in the UV tank, it is split into a separate pump tank and our boiling tank. And this tank will have the water pumped into the outside of the condenser. So it will also be seawater.
Water, so the seawater will be used also as,
The cooler condensing water, yes.
and once it kind of warms up, what happens to that? Does it go back to the tank?
We were assuming that free convection would allow it to stay at a cool enough temperature to continue to condense the water.
Well, we could also probably replace it within the boiling tank and then use that water that we,
After
it's
one
coming out
cycle.
of the UV tank, then it will be used for the pump. The UV tank sanitizes so no microorganisms can start growing within the pipe and pump tank. Then after it's pumped, since it's already a little bit warm, you can then replace that water with new seawater, put the pump tank water into the boiling pot. While it's already warm, use that warmth, heat it up further, and then continue the cycle.
Okay, so because your experiment, I saw that the cold water was going to come out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Room temperature, here it's going to be, you have only 7.5 liter of water to begin with, right?
So we're gonna put double that. The UV tank can fit double that, so you probably just want to do a little jump twice.
The use was so you're not picking up a very large weight of water, because flipping a huge tank is not easy for a lot of people.
So your calculation for the amount of power you need, water that kind of breaks down. You haven't done any calculation on how much water you need for each. You're running quite a lot. So you may never have enough water for that process. I mean, before you complete one batch, you probably run out of water.
So what
so we have reached our lunch break. We're running ahead of schedule, which is good, so we may get out earlier at the end. We have 45 minutes allocated for lunch, so we'll plan on reconvening back here about 12:15. So lunch, you had to RSVP ahead of time, so as long as you did, there should be enough box lunches out there. Thank you very much to Suzanne for all the hard work. I'm going to mention her again at the end, but she's been coordinating with facilities to set up